By the start of 1915, the world had plunged deeper into chaos. What began as a conflict centered in Europe had grown into a global war with far-reaching consequences. As the second year of World War I unfolded, new strategies, devastating battles, and technological horrors defined a year of grinding stalemate and shifting fronts. In this episode, part 2 of our 4-part series on World War I, we will dive into the events that shaped 1915. From poison gas on the Western Front to the disastrous Gallipoli campaign and the intensifying global reach of the war. Let's explore the defining moments of the second year of the Great War. This is HistoryCrafts. Earlier in 1915, a smaller offensive had already hinted at the horrors to come. In January, the Battle of Neuve-Chapelle saw the British attempt to break through German lines in northern France. Although they achieved initial success, poor communication and strong German counterattacks resulted in over 11,000 British casualties for minimal territorial gain. The Western Front remained locked in a deadly stalemate. Trenches stretched from the North Sea to the Swiss borders, and attempts to break through the lines led to unprecedented horrors. The Second Battle of Ypres marked the first large-scale use of chemical weapons in warfare. German forces unleashed chlorine gas against Allied troops, causing panic, chaos, and thousands of casualties. Over 6,000 Allied soldiers died from gas attacks, and thousands more were incapacitated. The horrific effects of gas warfare forced armies to innovate, introducing gas masks and protective measures. Despite the shock and devastation of the gas attacks, the Allies managed to hold the line, proving that chemical warfare, while terrifying, was not a decisive weapon. Following the Second Battle of Ypres, chemical warfare became more widespread. In late 1915, phosgene gas was introduced by German forces, which was more lethal than chlorine. It caused delayed symptoms, often leading to higher death rates, as soldiers appeared unharmed initially. By the end of the year, both sides had deployed gas over 20 times, causing tens of thousands of casualties. Special chemical units were established, and the use of gas forced nations to accelerate the development of protective equipment, such as improved gas masks. Leaders like British General Sir John French and German General Erich von Falkenhayn continued to grapple with the brutal realities of trench warfare, with neither side gaining significant ground. Also in January, the Ottoman forces clashed with the Russian troops in the Battle of Sarikamish. Ottoman losses exceeded 60,000 soldiers, primarily due to the freezing conditions. This disaster severely weakened Ottoman forces in the Caucasus, but also set the stage for their focus on the defense of the Dardanelles. The Allies also launched one of the most ambitious and disastrous campaigns of the war, the Gallipoli campaign. Seeking to knock out the Ottoman Empire out of the war and secure a supply route to Russia, British, French, Australian, and New Zealand forces attempted to seize the Dardanelles. The campaign began with a naval assault in March, but heavy Ottoman resistance, led by Mustafa Kemal Atatürk and backed by German advisors, repelled the Allies. In April, landings at the Anzac Cove and Cape Helles turned into a bloody stalemate. The harsh terrain, disease, and fierce Ottoman defense led to heavy casualties. The Allies lost over 44,000 troops, while Ottoman casualties exceeded 86,000. By the end of the year, the Allies admitted defeat, evacuating the forces in December. The failure at Gallipoli had profound political consequences, shaking British confidence and bolstering Ottomans' morale. Alongside the Gorlice-Tarnów offensive, smaller battles like the Battle of Courland in Latvia showed the persistence of the Russian army, despite devastating losses. In Courland, Russian forces fought fiercely to prevent the Central Powers from advancing further into the Baltic territories. Additionally, in Galicia, the capture of key railway hubs by Austro-Hungarian troops disrupted Russian supply lines and contributed to the collapse of their front. Russia launched the Second Battle of the Masurian Lakes in February, aiming to strike deep into East Prussia. However, German forces led by Paul von Hindenburg repelled the offensive, inflicting over 200,000 Russian casualties and forcing a retreat. This highlighted the strategic weakness of the Russian army, which struggled to sustain its massive losses and long supply lines. On the Eastern Front, the war was characterized by massive offensive and devastating losses once again. In May, the Central Powers launched the Gallice-Tarnów offensive against Russian forces. Led by German General August von Maxen, the offensive aimed to break through Russia's line in Galicia. The attack was a stunning success. Using heavy artillery and coordinated infantry assaults, German and Austro-Hungarian forces pushed the Russians back over 300 kilometers. Russian losses were staggering. Over 400,000 casualties and vast amounts of territory lost, including the key city of Przemyśl. The Gorlice-Tarnów offensive marked a turning point on the Eastern Front, forcing Russia into defensive posture and highlighting the Central Powers' ability to coordinate large-scale operations. Italy's involvement in the war had rippling effects across Europe. The campaigns not only stretched Austro-Hungarian resources, but also forced the Central Powers to divert troops from other fronts. In the initial months, Italy concentrated its efforts on capturing the Trentino region, but faced entrenched Austro-Hungarian defenses, making progress agonizingly slow. In May, Italy, a former member of the Triple Alliance, entered the war on the side of the Allies. The Treaty of London promised Italy territorial gains, including parts of Austria-Hungary and the Dalmatian Islands. Italy's entry opened a new front along the Italian Alps. The rugged terrain and harsh conditions made battles particularly grueling, like in Gallipoli. The first battle of the Isonzo saw Italian forces attack Austro-Hungarian positions, resulting in heavy casualties on both sides, but little territorial gain. Over 15 battles would occur on the Isonzo front during the war, exemplifying the futility of mountain warfare. Leaders like Italian General Luigi Cadorna faced immense challenges, balancing offensive ambitions with the realities of limited resources and difficult terrain. Germany's U-boat campaign in early 1915 also targeted vital British supply lines in the North Sea. The Battle of Dogger Bank in January saw British and German naval forces clash. Although the British forced the Germans to retreat, the encounter demonstrated the growing threat of naval engagement and maintaining control of critical shipping lanes. In the waters of the Atlantic, Germany intensified its U-boat campaign, targeting Allied shipping in an effort to break Britain's naval blockade. On May 7th, the German submarine U-20 sank the British passenger line RMS Lusitania. Of the 1,959 passengers and crew aboard, 1,198 lost their lives, including 128 Americans. This sinking shocked the world and escalated tensions between Germany and the United States. While Germany justified the attack by claiming the ship carried munitions, the incident drew international condemnation and fueled calls for the US involvement in the war. Submarine warfare continued to challenge traditional naval tactics, with both sides struggling to adapt. While battles raged across continents, 1915 was also marked by one of the darkest chapters of the war, the Armenian Genocide. In April, the Ottoman government began implementing mass arrests of Armenian leaders and intellectuals. Deportations followed, with entire villages forced to march through the Syrian desert, where thousands perished from starvation and exhaustion. The Ottoman Empire, fearing collaboration between Armenians and the Russian army, began a systematic campaign of deportation and massacre. Over 1.5 million Armenians were killed or displaced, with countless others forced into exile. The genocide remains a deeply controversial and tragic part of the war's history. The Ottoman military also targeted Assyrian and Greek communities, with hundreds of thousands of civilians killed or deported during what historians now recognize as part of broader ethnic cleansing campaigns. In occupied regions of Poland and Lithuania, German forces enforced harsh requisition policies, seizing food supplies and forcing local populations into labor camps. These policies exacerbated famine and disease, leading to thousands of civilian deaths. Other atrocities occurred on multiple fronts, highlighting the human cost of the conflict. War bonds also became a critical part of the financial strategies for nations. In Germany, over 10 billion marks were raised through war bond campaigns, while Britain and France mobilized similar efforts to finance their militaries. Enlistment campaigns also intensified. By the end of 1915, over 2.5 million British men had enlisted, while Russia had conscripted more than 6 million soldiers. Industrial production surged, with Britain manufacturing over 3,000 machine guns per month, and France producing 1,000 artillery pieces monthly to meet the demands of the growing war effort. The year also saw an increased participation from colonial troops. Over 100,000 Indian soldiers fought for the British Empire in campaigns across Europe and the Middle East. Similarly, troops from the French colonies in Africa were deployed on the Western Front, highlighting the global reach of the war. By the end of 1915, the war's scope had expanded dramatically. Over 20 million soldiers were now mobilized across all fronts, with battles raging in Europe, Africa, Asia and the Middle East. The main participants still included the Allied powers, France, Britain, Russia, Italy, Japan and Serbia, and the Central Powers, Germany, Austro-Hungary and the Ottoman Empire. Italy's entry into the war added a new dimension to Allied strategy, while the Ottoman Empire's resilience continued to challenge Allied advances. Casualties mounted on an unprecedented scale. The Second Battle of Ypres alone saw over 100,000 casualties, while Gallipoli claimed over 130,000 lives. The year's event underscored the increasingly global and devastating nature of the conflict yet to come. As 1915 drew to a close, the world was entrenched in a conflict that showed no signs of resolution. New fronts, devastating losses, and technological horrors defined a year that pushed nations and societies to their limits. From the trenches of Ypres to the shores of Gallipoli and the icy peaks of the Italian Alps, 1915 set the stage for even greater struggles to come. Join us next time as we explore 1916, a year marked by colossal battles and the endurance of a world at war. And as always, this is HistoryCrafts, where history crafts itself.